He didn't take his eyes off the spot where the line had vanished. Leo Vance, a whirlwind of nervous energy and mismatched tech brand t-shirts, tapped furiously at a tablet tethered to the projector. That's the 12th run Eris. The data is solid. Corrupted, obviously, but solidly corrupted. Data isn't solidly corrupted, Eris muttered, rubbing the bridge of his nose where a phantom headache was beginning to form. It's either data or it's garbage. This is something else. It's like the satellite told our receiver it was in hell for a few seconds, and the receiver just said, okay, sounds good. Kalen Magnuson, universally known as Dragon, leaned against the door frame of the command center, his arms crossed over a chest as broad as a filing cabinet. His face, a roadmap of harsh sun and harsher experiences, was impassive. As head of security and the ranch's resident pragmatist, he viewed all data with the same suspicion he reserved for rattlesnakes and politicians. So the fancy GPS lied, Dragon set his voice a low, gravelly rumble. What's the takeaway? Don't trust a $30 billion military satellite network. The takeaway, Eris countered, gesturing at the hologram, is that something between Homestead 2 and that Mesa is broadcasting a signal powerful enough to spoof a military-grade GPS receiver into thinking it's tunneling to the center of all the Earth. It's not a glitch, it's a hijack. The experiment had been deceptively simple. Jay Stratton, a former investigator from the ranch's previous, more secretive government-funded era, had come back for a visit. Eris, ever the scientist, proposed they track his movements, postulating that the ranch's infamous phenomena might react to a familiar presence. The idea was to see if the property remembered him. The results suggested it not only remembered him, but it tried to drag his digital ghost into the underworld as a souvenir. The ranch's owner, the enigmatic and perpetually off-site Brandon Farrow, had a two-word response when Eris briefed him on the call Map It, which is why Leo was here. All right, let's talk about the new toy, Eris said, turning to Leo. Leo's eyes lit up. He scurried over to a large pelican case and opened it with the reverence of a priest revealing a holy relic. Inside, nestled in custom-cut foam, was a camera that looked like a cyberpunk insect eye. Behold the Tetracam 5 12 multispectral imager, he announced. Primarily designed. What's it going to tell us about that? Disturbed Earth, Leo said, lifting the camera carefully. Plants growing over soil that's been dug up, filled in, or fundamentally altered will reflect light differently. Their root systems are different, the water retention is different, the nutrient profile is different. To this camera, that difference screams. I have colleagues who found entire Roman villas under wheat fields in England with this tech. If something unnatural is buried out there where the GPS went nuts, this bird will see its shadow on the surface. Eris felt a familiar thrill, the pure, unadulterated joy of a new tool, a new method, a new way to peel back a layer of the mystery. For 4 years, Crimson Ridge Ranch, or Skinwalker Ranch, as the sensationalists love to call it, had been his life's work, his obsession, and his professional exile. After publishing a paper on the statistical likelihood of non-terrestrial artifacts being embedded in the solar system, a paper that was academically sound but professionally suicidal, he'd been gently but firmly shown the door at his university. Brendan Farrow's offer to lead a privately funded investigation into the high strangeness hotspot had been a lifeline he couldn't refuse. Okay, Leo, Eris said, a slow smile spreading across his face. Let's go fly your magic farming camera. Let's see what secrets the grass is keeping. Chapter 2, The Groundskeeper. While Leo prepared his high-tech drone for its mission, a far more terrestrial task was underway on the opposite side of the property. At the base of the colossal mesa that dominated the ranch's skyline, Connor Sully O'Sullivan was wrestling with a drill. Sully was the ranch manager, a man whose family had been in the Uinta Basin since the days of horse-drawn everything. His skin was the color and texture of well-worn leather, and he had a repository of local lore that made the internet look poorly sourced. He'd seen glowing orbs chase his cattle, had his tools vanish from a locked shed only to reappear on the roof, and once saw something he described as a refrigerator-sized hummingbird levitate a calf 50 feet in the air. He was therefore almost impossible to surprise. The current object of his frustration was a portable gas-powered core drill. It was a
Since I
stubborn,
joined this
noisy beast
investigation,
that he
the
and a
mesa has
hired
been a
hand
major
named Joe
hotspot of
were
of
trying to
some
haul
very
to the top of the
bizarre
mesa.
lights moving
She's got
across the
some
mesa.
heft Joe grunted adjusting
And
his
even a
grip
beam
on the
of
steel
light
frame.
emitting from it.
Aye, she's a heavy girl,
Again,
Sully
I think it was around
agreed,
11:30
wiping sweat
at
from his
night,
brow with the
and
back of
three
a
of us
gloved
were
hand.
walking down the
But
path,
we're not
joking with
getting
each other.
answers by
All of a sudden, we
asking
got quiet.
nicely. The
And
target
that's because
was an
we got to a
anomaly their
point,
ground-penetrating
and we could feel the
radar had
temperature
pinged
change.
months ago. Deep
And as we
inside the
moved forward to
sandstone mesa,
Homestead 2,
something
it got
dense
colder
and
and
metallic
colder.
was
There
lurking.
was a tree
The
probably
GPR
300
showed two
yards or so
distinct
shy of
shapes,
the
a
Homestead
vast
2.
dome-like structure hundreds of
One
feet
of my
across and
teammates was
behind
saying
it,
that we
something
can't cross that
vertical,
line.
standing over
And
100
we all
feet
had the
tall.
attitude, "Now,
Their
screw that,
first
we're
two
going,"
attempts to
right?
drill into the dome
could
from the
not cross
side
that
had
line.
failed spectacularly.
No matter
The
how hard we
industrial
tried.
drill bits capable of
First thing we
chewing
felt
through
was fear.
solid granite had been
And when my
turned to
teammates looked up
slag
and he
against
saw
a material of
dark mass
impossible
in the top of
durability.
Homestead 2, like a
They
shadow
had,
figure or
however,
something
managed to
looking back at
retrieve
us.
tiny fragments in the drill mud
basically, that was
fragments
what we felt
composed
like.
of
Whatever
aluminum,
was going on
iron,
down
and
there,
other
we wanted to
elements
see
in
it.
an alloy
We wanted to be there.
eerily similar to the
so
heat
much in
shielding
this story.
materials NASA used.
One thing I've
The new
got to
plan
tell
was a
you,
flanking
just,
maneuver. They
for
would go to the
academic
top of the
honesty
mesa
and ethics,
and drill
is
straight
that,
down, aiming to
we're
bypass
gonna
the
use
impenetrable
you
dome
today
and
as
hit the
part
vertical
of an
object
experiment.
behind it. The process was
not gonna
brutally
tell you what
analog.
the experiment
A
is until
generator
afterwards,
powered a
'cause I
pump
don't
that
wanna
sent
taint
water up a
the
long
outcome of
hose
the
to the
experiment.
drill rig, lubricating the bit
Right.
and cooling it as it
I've worked
ground
with Jay
against the
for
rock.
several years now,
It was slow,
and I've heard him say
dirty,
many
back-breaking
times
work.
how he
Reminds
strongly
me of a
believes
story my
Skinwalker Ranch
granddad
seemed to
used to
react
tell
to
Sully.
his
Said as
stress
they
and
paused for a
others. So that
break,
gave
the drill
Eric and I
chugging
an
away
idea
at a pace
to
of
see
mere
if we
inches
could
per
actually
hour.
prove it.
Said the
Work
old
bait
Ute
comes with
shamans
any
called this
danger, we're
mesa
not
the
making you- you're not
Thunderbird's
shark
nest.
bait or anything like
Claimed
that,
a star
right?
fell
I
from the
trust you guys.
sky and buried
Well, I
itself in the
appreciate that.
rock ages
So
ago.
we're going to go on a tour
Said
of
it
the
sleeps
ranch a
in
little bit.
there,
You tell us
and it's
about the
best
things
not
you
to
see
wake
and
it
so
up.
on. And
You
we'll be
think
taking
that's
data
what we're
while
drilling
doing that,
into,
and then
Joe asked,
afterwards we'll tell
looking
you
at the vibrating
what type of
machinery with a
data
new
and
sense
that
of
sort of thing.
unease.
Okay.
Sully squinted at the
Eric and I
horizon.
have come up with an experiment
I think
to
my
test
granddad
if
drank
the
a
ranch
fair bit
reacts
of
to
whiskey,
JDs.
but I also
That's
think
what
he
we'd like to
wasn't
find
one
out.
for telling lies.
Again, investigation's
He
important.
looked down at the drill. It
Obviously,
was a
it makes a
direct,
lot of sense for us to
forceful,
study very
almost brutish
carefully
way of seeking
anything that our
knowledge.
instruments can
A
detect
stark
as we bring
contrast to
Jay
Leo's
onto the
elegant,
property and
non-invasive
take him
scan
to certain
happening
points
a
of
mile
interest
away.
from his experience,
Here on the ranch,
as
both
well as
methods
to
felt
determine
equally
whether the
necessary
ranch would
and
respond to
equally
the
likely
novelty
to
of
provoke
his
a
presence.
response.
Well, I really
Waking
like
up a
this
sleeping
plan. You know, we've
Thunderbird,
got a
Sully
course
thought
laid out
suddenly
for
seemed
ourselves.
like
We've
a
got some instruments
remarkably
that we wanna take
plausible
with us, so
outcome.
we should
Chapter
go
3,
get the instrument.
the Southern Fields.
I
As
figure
the
we
sun
put it on
began
the
its
hood
slow
at
yards
night,
away, lay another heap
myself
of
and
tan
my
fur
homestead
and
too.
bone. Another dead deer.
And as we made that
Dragon
turn,
raised his
there's a little
binoculars.
tree casting
Looks
a
fresh.
shadow,
Too
line
fresh.
across the road.
They approached
And as we
cautiously.
pushed towards that
The
line,
scene was grimly familiar,
I said,
yet different.
"Do you guys
This
feel
carcass
that?"
was more disturbed, the bones showing
And
signs of
immediately one of
extreme
my
trauma.
teammates said,
As
"Yeah,
Dragon
the hair's standing
documented
up
the
on the back
scene
of
with
my
his
neck."
camera, he noticed something odd about the scapula, the shoulder blade.
Feeling the
Two
fear
large,
about
perfectly
right
round
here,
holes were punched
and the
through the
temperature
thickest
inversion
part of the
was
bone.
about right here, too.
Canine
Really?
marks, Caleb whispered his hand,
And it was a
resting
wall.
on the grip
You
of
could
his
put your arm
sidearm.
through it,
If
and
a
you could feel
coyote
the
did
cold
that,
versus
Dragon
the heat.
replied, zooming in with his camera,
It was a
it's a
drastic
coyote
drop.
that benches
Something that just
400
didn't
pounds. Those holes are huge.
As soon as we
Whatever
come
did
around the
this had a
corner,
bite
the
force that's
feeling
off the
was turn around
charts.
and go back.
The conversation immediately turned
On
to
the
the
second
ranch's
floor
most
of Homestead
infamous
2,
legend, the
through the night
creature the
vision
Sherman
device,
family, the
we
previous
saw what
owners had
resembled a
encountered.
dark shadow
They had
figure.
described a beast that looked like a wolf, but was impossibly large. Its
I
head
wanna ask
standing
about
nearly
the-
with
Our
guns.
team has seen such
But
a
what
distinct
was the
shadowy figure
protocol
like
for a
what Jay
predator that
described.
might be
We did
interdimensional
have a very
bulletproof
similar
and capable
experience
of
at
punching
Homestead
through
2 back in
bone like it was
2020.
styrofoam? He lowered his camera.
When my
The
friend,
sun had dipped below the
Rabbi Ariel
horizon, and the
Zadok
southern fields were
performed
now
an ancient
cloaked in an
Hebrew
inky
prayer that
primordial
was
darkness.
actually designed
The
for
silence
opening
was back deeper
interdimensional
this
portals.
time. It
Our
no
thermal
longer felt
cameras
like it was
captured a
listening.
temperature vortex
It felt
forming near the second
like it
floor
was
of
hunting.
Homestead 2,
Let's head back,
right
Dragon,
where Jay saw
said
that
his
shadowy
voice a low
figure
command.
appear.
Slow
that is
and easy.
older than its
The walk
surroundings,
back to the
moving
command
very
center was the
fast.
longest mile of his life. Every rustle of sagebrush, every gust of wind sounded like the footfalls of a monster.
Could this be the same type of phenomenon that Jay and his colleagues witnessed here over 10 years ago?
Circles
We can't
and
say
lines.
for sure. But
The next afternoon, the entire team gathered in the command center. The air crackled with anticipation. Leo, looking like a kid on Christmas morning who'd just been handed the keys to a spaceship, stood before the holographic. The tree by Homestead 2 were 5 perfectly straight, perfectly parallel lines. They were stark white against the dark ground, looking like ghostly roads on a landscape of shadows. Like the circles, their geometric precision was jarring. Nature abhorred a straight line, but here were 5 of them laid out with the precision of a blueprint. What in God's name are those, Eris whispered. Trenches, Evelyn Reed, the team's pragmatic geologist, suggested.
But I
Maybe
can tell
the
you
old
this is
ranch
not
owner
arson,
Bigelow
this
did
is
some
not
exploratory
chemical,
digging.
and this is the
They're on a
million-dollar
perfect
question,
east-west
Dragon.
axis, Leo pointed out. The odds of that happening by chance are, let's see, carry the 1 to 0, and look how they converge. They're not just parallel, they're a coherent system. They lead somewhere. Eris felt a dizzying sense of vertigo, as if the ground beneath him had shifted. The circles, the lines, the GPS anomaly, it was all one thing. It wasn't just a collection of random weirdness. It was a design. 2 years ago, he said, slowly, the memory surfacing with a fresh chill, Brandon was given a warning from the Shermans, the family who owned the ranch before Bigelow. They pointed to this exact area near Homestead, too, and said one thing, don't dig. A heavy silence descended on the room.
So how hot would it have to
The
be to
holographic
just
image of the lines and circles pulsed softly in the center of the room. A cryptic map laid bare by technology. A map that someone or something had gone to great... I'll go get the excavator. Chapter 5. The warning in the dirt. The decision to dig was not made lightly. Eris argued for more non-invasive scans. Dragon argued for a perimeter lockdown and extreme caution. But the sight of those lines, so deliberate and mysterious, was too tantalizing to ignore. The warning only added to the allure. What could be buried there that was so dangerous, it warranted a multi-generational taboo. The next morning, Sully was at the controls of a yellow 3-ton excavator, its hydraulic arm poised over the field like the limb of a curious dinosaur. The rest of the team stood at a safe distance, a small arsenal of monitoring equipment deployed around them. Geiger counters, spectrum analyzers, magnetometers, a symphony of scientific instruments ready to detect whatever they might stir up. You're monitoring the 1.6 gigahertz band, right? Eris asked Evelyn over the radio. Constantly, she replied from her station at the command center, along with everything else. So far, the only anomaly is Sully's taste in classic rock on the radio. Eris managed a weak smile. The 1.6 gigahertz's frequency had become their white whale, a strange, powerful, and possibly intelligent signal that appeared at moments of peak strangeness only to vanish without a trace. If digging was going to provoke a response, that's where they would hear it first.
Hey guys, how are you?
All right, Sully, Eris said into his radio. Let's start with a trench perpendicular to the lines, a shallow cut north to south. Let's see if we can intersect one. With a roar and a plume of diesel, smoke the excavator bit into the earth. The bucket came up with rich, dark topsoil and dumped it to the side. Again and again, the machine worked, carving a neat trench in the pristine field. They were about 4 feet down when Caleb shouted, "Hold it, Sully, stop!" The excavator's arm froze in midair. Caleb jumped into the trench, pointing at the freshly cut wall. There, you see that? Eris and Dragon scrambled in after him. There, embedded in the dark soil, was a distinct layer of something else. It was a grayish, almost silvery material, about a foot thick, with a strange clay-like consistency. It was a clear, sharp line of demarcation in the otherwise uniform stratigraphy. It's a discontinuity, Evelyn said, her voice a mix of excitement and confusion. The line. We've hit the line. Sully climbed out of the cab and joined them in the trench, crumbling a piece of the gray material in his gloved fingers. Well, I'll be. Never seen anything like this around here. Look at that. He held it out. In the bright sunlight, the material glittered. It was packed with fine crystalline particles that caught the light like microscopic diamonds. Why would someone bury 5 stripes of this stuff in a field? Dragon asked, his brow furrowed. What is it? That's the million-dollar question, Eris said carefully, bagging a sample. It's clearly man-made, or at least artificially deposited. The layer is too uniform, the boundaries too sharp. They decided to dig a second trench 50 yards to the east to confirm the line continued. As Sully maneuvered the excavator, Eris's mind spun with possibilities. Could it be a marker visible only to a specific kind of sensor? He recalled his own wild theory, voiced half-jokingly in the command center. Imagine during the Bigelow era, they were doing some classified program. They dig straight lines, put this reflective material in it, then cover it all up so they could look at it with a classified sensor from space or high altitude. It seemed less funny now. The second trench yielded the same result, another cross-section of the glittering gray stratum. But it also yielded something else. As the excavator's bucket scraped against the bottom of the trench, there was a loud metallic clang. Whoa! Sully yelled, cutting the engine. This time, it was Aris who jumped into the trench first. He brushed away the loose soil and his fingers closed around a flat, hard object. He pulled it free. It was a piece of metal about the size of his hand. It was thin, strangely light, and covered in the same gray crystalline material. But underneath the metal itself was a dark, non-reflective black, with an edge that was impossibly sharp, as if sheared, not broken. He held it up, his heart pounding. This wasn't part of an old plow. It wasn't a piece of farm equipment. It felt advanced. He looked at the trench, at the inexplicable layer of sparkling gray earth stretching off in a perfectly straight line under the field. He looked at the impossible piece of metal in his hand. The Sherman's warning echoed in his mind. Don't dig. It wasn't a superstitious warning, he realized. It was a practical one. It was the kind of warning you give when you know someone has buried something they desperately want to remain hidden. And they had just hit it with a shovel. Chapter 6, the circuit board. The lab results arrived via encrypted email 2 days later. Aris gathered the team in the command center, the sense of gravity so thick he felt he could measure it with a barometer. He projected the elemental analysis from the University of Utah onto the holographic display. Okay, he began his voice tight. This is the composition of the gray crystalline material we dug up from the lines in the field. A list of elements and their percentages appeared in the air. Sodium, magnesium, scandium, calcium, potassium, and in significant amounts, aluminum and iron. It's an interesting mix, Evelyn said, studying the numbers. Highly conductive elements, salty metallic, could be some kind of industrial slurry maybe, for grounding a large electrical installation. Maybe Aris said, his eyes gleaming. But now let's compare it to something else. This is the analysis of the drill mud we collected from the mesa, from the time our drill bit was ground to dust against the dome. He swiped, and a second set of data appeared alongside the first. The room fell silent. The compositions were nearly identical. The percentages were a near-perfect match. The same sodium, the same magnesium, the same high concentrations of aluminum and iron.
The last time we drilled from the bottom of the mesa, we were able to reach the vertical and potentially
the mud from inside the mesa is out here buried in stripes in the field. It wasn't just put there, Aris said, his voice barely a whisper as the pieces clicked into place in his mind with the force of a tectonic shift. It was extracted from the mesa and laid out in this pattern. And according to ranch lore, it had doors. The tip came from Chris Bartell, a former security guard from the Bigelow era, a man with a 1,000-yard stare and a reluctance to speak about his time on the ranch. Aris had spent months convincing him to come back for a visit. Finally, he'd agreed. He led them along the rocky southern slope of the mesa, a place they had crossed 100 times, and stopped at a massive jumble of boulders that looked like they had been piled up by a giant's careless hand. It was here, Bartell said, his voice raspy. An opening. A cave. Not big, but it went deep. We were under strict orders not to go inside. One day we came out on patrol and it was gone.
But there was a couple
sealed up,
on one of them
covered by all this. He gestured to the tons of rock. A rock slide Evelyn asked, examining the formation with a geologist's eye. That's the official story, Bartell said with a humorless smile. But there were no blast marks, no signs of a natural collapse. This was placed deliberately. A sealed door on a machine. The implication sent a shiver down Aris's spine. After Bartell left the team down into the cracks between the boulders and vanished into the heart of the mesa, no smoke emerged from any other part of the rock face. It was simply gone. There's a massive void in there, Evelyn confirmed, her voice filled with awe. The temperature difference between the outside air and a large, cool underground cavern system would create a pressure differential. It's a natural chimney effect, but the volume of air it's pulling in, that cavern has to be enormous. They stood in silence, watching the last wisps of smoke disappear. The mesa was not solid. It was hollow. It had chambers, tunnels, a secret interior world. And somewhere in that darkness, something had been sealed away. The Thunderbird's Nest Sully had called it. Looking at the silent, brooding rock face, Harris thought it felt more like a tomb or a cage.
Really exotic, like
Chapter 8,
of the day, an orb like that
The
showing
Eye
up, a
in the
sphere
Abyss.
showing up. That's crazy.
The smoke experiment proved the void existed. The next logical step was to try and see inside it.
At first glance,
Moving the boulders was out, but the crevices that had swallowed screen, going down. The view was a dizzying journey through a world of rock and shadow. The camera scraped past jagged edges of sandstone, squeezed through narrow passages, and descended into the blackness.
That was spotted in the
5
south field
feet,
does
10
resemble
feet,
a model I made of an
15.
orange orb that
Harris
appeared during an
narrated his
experiment
voice
with a
tense.
swarm of drones
The
a few
shaft was
weeks
deeper
ago.
than any of them had expected.
All right, we have
They
Colonel's
saw no
arm,
sign
guys.
of the smoke grenades,
Look at
which should have
that.
been lodged somewhere along the way. The
got
passage was
something right
clean
there.
almost unnaturally
Looking
so.
at it, looks like it actually
21
is a
feet.
doesn't it?
Still going.
There's some dark spot
Suddenly,
to it.
the narrow
From
passage opened
modeling
up.
that, I put this
The
together.
camera was now dangling in a much
and,
larger
this
space.
is kind of my
The
idea of what it
powerful
looks like.
LEDs cut through the darkness,
Why don't I bring
illuminating
that
the
up for
far
comparison?
wall of a cavern.
You
Holy,
kind of compare that to
Sully
that.
whispered. It's
There
a
is a
real
similarity.
cave.
Yeah.
Wade Harris said, his finger hovering over the
definitely need to
control
get to the bottom of
joystick.
this, because
What is
that
that?
is
At
the
the bottom of the
direction that
screen,
that
something
burnt-
caught
that
the
that
light.
burnt post
It
is
wasn't
at.
the dull ochre
I mean,
color
the
of the
interesting thing about
sandstone.
that
It
burnt
was a
fence
bright
post is we
metallic
found it
glint.
after
He
we saw
carefully
that
manipulated the
bright purple
camera,
flashing
panning
down
it
the
downwards.
southern part.
The object came into focus.
Yeah.
It was lying on a ledge, partially covered in
We might call
dust
it
and
something
rock
in the
debris.
middle of the day.
It
Right,
looked like a
which is
strip of
amazing.
metal, maybe
What
2
I find
feet long,
fascinating
with a
about this
strange
orb
ribbed
is it's
texture.
there 1 second,
One
and
side
it's
was a
gone so
shiny
quickly. It
silvery
must be
color,
moving at a high
while a
rate of
black
speed,
stripe
and it
ran
just so
down the other.
happens it's in the same
It
area
looked
where
like
we
a
found
piece
this
of
strange
high-tech
burnt
trim,
post
something
and a
that
dead
might have
deer.
fallen
Are
off
they
a
related?
satellite or a
Incidents
stealth
happened
bomber.
down on that part
That
of the
is not
property in a
natural,
very
Harris
short
stated, his
period of
voice
time.
flat with
I think, if
certainty.
anything,
What
that
in the
shows us
world
that
is a
we need
piece of
to
manufactured
deploy some
metal
more
doing
assets
23
down
feet down inside a
and,
solid mesa?
instrument that side
He
of the
tried to
property
get a
out a little
closer
bit
look,
better.
but the camera's angle was
And I'll
wrong.
go poke
As he
around if
maneuvered
there's
it,
more,
the
see if
view
I can
shifted
find
and he
any.
saw
Yeah, we
something
just need
else
to
that
up
made
the
his
amount of time
blood
we
run
spend there, at
cold.
least in the short
Wedged in
term.
a
To
returning
solve
mud.
the mystery
The first
and
100 feet
reveal
went smoothly. The drill chewed through the softer earth at the
secret
base of the mesa. Then it hit the
of
sandstone.
Skinwalker Ranch.
The noise changed the strain on the engine, deepening. It was making progress, but it was slow. An hour passed. Then 2.
Here we
The drill had advanced nearly 200 feet into the mesa. And then the drill operator noticed
on over,
something
Pete.
wrong. We've got
What
a
you got
problem,
for
he
me?
called out to Evelyn.
I'm glad
We're
you're
not
here
getting any
because
fluid back.
Eric was telling
Evelyn
spots that
ran
have been
to the
disturbed
collection
perhaps in the
pit.
past.
It was nearly empty.
Last
How much
week,
have you pumped in?
We're
She
going
asked,
to
a
use
knot
you
of dread
today
forming
as
in her
part
stomach.
of an experiment.
The operator checked
we
his
conducted
gauges.
an experiment with
About
former Skinwalker
500
Ranch
gallons from this
investigator
tank,
Jay Stratton.
1,000 from
See
the
if
last
the property
one.
would
We're
respond
pushing
in some
2,000
way to
gallons of
his
slurry
presence.
into that hill, and
Go
none of it
ahead.
is coming
You are
out.
cleared for
The
takeoff.
entire
We took
team
him on a
gathered
tour
at the
where
edge
he
of
had
the pit,
experienced
staring at the dry
phenomena
earth.
when he was here over a
2,000
decade ago,
gallons,
and we
enough
were
to fill a
shocked
small
by the
swimming
results.
pool. It had vanished without
Went
a trace.
several hundred feet
It's punching
underground
through into
between
the void,
Homestead
the
2
drill operator
and
said,
the drill
shaking his
site
head
at the
in
Mesa.
disbelief. That
So
cavity
now,
is drinking
Eric
everything we
Bard
throw
arranged
at
for
it.
technologist
It's gotta
Pete
be the size
Kelsey
of a
to
cathedral
come back
in there.
out to help us
The
search for
scale of the
anything
cavern
strange or
system was orders
unnatural
of magnitude
beneath
larger
that
than they had
location.
imagined.
Pete,
The mesa
fill us
wasn't
in
just
on what
hollow.
you've got.
It was a sponge, a labyrinth of such
Multispectral.
immense volume that it could
What does it
swallow
do?
thousands of gallons
Well,
of water
it's
and not
designed
spill a
really
drop.
to work in
And
agriculture.
just as that realization
If
was
the
sinking in
soil
a
under-
shrill alarm cut through the air,
A drone-based
it was the
multispectral
spectrum
camera
analyzer.
is designed to
Harris
image different
sprinted to the
wavelengths of
monitoring
light.
station.
By scanning
On the
the
screen,
ground,
a
it
clean,
can build a
sharp spike
geophysical
had appeared
model of the
exactly at
surface
1 point
that could help us
6
identify
gigahertz.
any evidence
back,
of
he
past
said, his voice
excavations
grim.
or even
We've
underground
got it.
structures like
We
tunnels.
knocked on the door, and something
Multispectral
just
camera.
answered.
It's
The
typically
signal was
used,
strong, stable.
on
It
farms
wasn't a
and for
random burst
agriculture
of
to
cosmic
determine,
noise. It was methodical,
the
deliberate,
health, if you will,
a
of the
wave of
crops.
unease washed
But
over the gator, shouting from the monitoring
Using
station.
ground-penetrating
Harris,
radar,
get over
we've
here, my
identified
spectrum
2
analyzer is
possibly metallic
broadcasting.
anomalies
It's not supposed
buried
to
in the
do that.
mesa.
Harris ran to the station.
One is about
the device
400
designed to
feet
be a
long,
passive
and
receiver
we believe
was
that
emitting
it's
its
shaped
own
like a dome.
powerful radio
I'm up
frequency
against
signal.
something pretty
It was
hard
like a
right now.
microphone
It could
suddenly
even
turning
be
into a megaphone.
maybe a dome.
That's impossible, Harris
We've
stammered.
conducted 2
And
drilling
then Dragon's
operations
voice
trying to
roared.
penetrate,
Panic
and
blasted
we
from the
failed
radio.
both times.
Man down,
But
man down.
we
Tom's
did collect
collapsed. I
small
need
fragments
medical
that
now.
face
The world seemed to slow to
And
a
behind
crawl.
that, we've
Harris's
identified
mind
something in a
reeled.
vertical
The signal,
position
the
that's
analyzer
over 100
broadcasting
feet tall
Tom
and about
collapsing it
40
was
feet
all
below the
happening
surface
at
of the mesa.
Dragon's next transmission was even more terrifying.
Since we couldn't penetrate the dome-shaped object, Joe has brought out a manually operated drill that we hope can reach the vertical anomaly from the top and help us identify just what it is.
Chaos erupted.
We've got 1,000
The drilling was
plus pounds
immediately
of stuff to get
halted.
up there. I guess we should
Dragon,
get it
using his
unloaded.
security UTV, sped towards the ranch
gonna be
entrance,
fun.
rushing Tom towards the nearest
6
hospital.
years I've heard all
The
kinds of
entire
crazy stories
operation
about
ground
this
to a halt,
mesa.
replaced by a stunned,
Spacecraft going
fearful
in
silence. Tom
tunnels,
Lewis had gone
caverns,
down in the
underground
exact
bases.
same
We've seen the
10-foot
mesa
radius
light up.
where a Ute elder
Definitely
had
makes me
nearly
wonder
collapsed
what's going
years
on
earlier.
inside the
The same
mesa.
spot where Eris himself had
Dude,
received a
where's
bizarre
Cameron's helicopter?
sunburn-like radiation burn on his scalp despite wearing a hat. It was a focal point, a kill zone,
Well, we got-
and they had just activated.
Cameras that we
Was
set
any
up in the
discovery
area,
worth the risk
ground,
to their lives?
right near where
In
Thomas
the
saw the
end, the
purple
decision
light.
to proceed came from an unlikely source, Tom himself.
I don't think it's
On
a
a
bad
video
thing for us
call
to
from
get
his
out on
hospital
foot
bed,
and
he
go
was
cruise around
adamant.
here and see if there's anything
You
that
can't
looks out of
stop,
place.
he'd said,
I
his
completely
voice
agree.
weak but firm. We're closer than anyone has ever been. Don't let what happened to me scare you off. That's what
There's
he
a lot
wants.
of area through here.
His
I mean,
words and the unanimous
you can only
agreement of the
cover
drilling
on foot,
crew
though,
who felt
right?
they were on the verge of a breakthrough convinced
Bones.
gallon after gallon of
The
buried
data
300
from
feet
his
inside a
multi-spectral
sandstone
schemes.
mesa was, to
Caleb
put it
Biggs,
mildly,
Dragon, and
deeply
Thomas Winterton
strange.
hiked up
How
to the
did it
top
get
of the
in there,
mesa to
Caleb
check
asked
in
the
with Joe
question on
Lowe
everyone's
on the
mind.
progress of
And
his
to what
drilling
end, Dragon
operation.
added. What is
We're
it?
sitting right on
Aris,
top.
a craft of unknown
Always
origin,
ready.
had crashed there
Later
or
that
landed there
afternoon,
in the distant
Eric
past.
gathered us all
What
to
if
the
the
command
mesa had
center
formed
after
around
Pete
it over
Kelsey told him
geological
he had
time,
fully
entombing
processed
it
the
in a
data
shell of
from the
solid
scans
stone?
between the Mesa
object
drill
they had
site
hit
and
wasn't
Homestead
a
2.
natural ledge. It was the outer
Hey,
hull of a
hey,
buried
hey,
artifact.
Hey,
The
guys.
flakes weren't rock.
Well,
the
they're-
only sound
yeah,
in a world
those are the
that had
ones that
suddenly
really
gone
stand
quiet.
out.
Yeah, they really
It's
do.
not
They
just
do
a
look out of
pulse,
place.
Leo Vance declared
right
3
across
days
from
into
the
a
hillside.
caffeine-fueled
I mean,
obsession. He
I'm
stood
not a
before the main
botanist,
monitor
but
in the command
how's
center,
that
which
gonna
displayed a
happen
dizzying
naturally?
waterfall of data.
And at this
A
spot
simple
right
beacon
here,
would be a sine wave.
That's really
A
interesting.
repeating monotonous
it's clear
blip.
that someone
This-
or something
this
has disturbed the
grammar.
ground where
He
these
zoomed
circles
in
were
on a section of
identified.
the signal.
Now, it
The
could
clean
be that
spike
they were
had
simply
first seen
left
was
by
revealed
old
to be a
grain
complex
silos that
structure of
previous
smaller
ranchers had
nested
used there.
pulses, arranged in a non-random pattern. It's a data
But it
packet, he
also
explained,
reminded
his
me
voice
of when retired
trembling
local
with a
sheriff
mixture of
Chris
exhaustion
Corey
and
visited the
discovery.
ranch 2
It
years
repeats
ago.
every
He
72
shared an
point,
incredible
3
story
seconds.
about something he saw
Inside
back
each
in the
packet are
1980s,
blocks of information
not far
encoded
from
in what
Alabama
looks like a
College.
form
So
of
this is
phase
the
shift
spot.
keying,
There was
but one
matted
that's orders of
grass where
magnitude more
something
complex than anything
is
we've
said
developed.
in each
It's like
weed
looking at a
had
sentence
major
written in a
pressure
language
in
that
the
has
dirt.
1,000
23
vowels.
feet
Eris
into
leaned
10.
closer, his own fatigue forgotten.
I
Can you find any
presume
structure,
it was a
any repetition
spaceship.
within the packets? That's the crazy part, Leo said, pointing to a highlighted
That's
block
it,
of
didn't
code. This section here, it's a mathematical constant, pi,
Are there
to
any
32
other
decimal
circular
places.
feet?
Well defined.
And this one here is
Ground.
in the Mesa
We need to
wasn't just a
investigate them
hostile
and look
defense
for any
system.
other
It
anomalies
was a
in the data.
communicator. The attack
Got any
on
other
Tom
cool
Lewis
spots?
had been a warning shot, a
I
visceral
do.
get off my lawn.
So the
But
next
this signal
bit
was something
is
else.
right
It was a
here.
statement of being
Just
a
to the west.
declaration of
Doesn't
intelligence.
quite fit.
It's a
is
diagnostic
down
check,
here.
Eris mused,
There's
staring
a
at the
horizontal
screen.
line right
We
here.
drilled a hole in its
Hey,
side
go
and
to
it
the
woke up.
grayscale view.
Now it's running a
Hold on a
system
minute, Pete.
check.
It's actually
taking
4
its own
lines.
temperature, checking its
If you look
systems,
closely,
and
you got the top
broadcasting
one
the
and then the
results.
one right
The
under,
question
kind of
is,
broken in the
who is it
dark spot there.
broadcasting
Yep.
to?
And then there's the
Chapter
one under
14
that,
echoes
and then
in
the
the
bottom
dark.
one.
As
It might
Leo
even be
worked to
5
decipher
lines.
the signal's language,
just
the range
strange.
itself began to change.
So, Pete,
The
I'm
phenomena,
just
once
wondering,
sporadic and
It's thrown
localized, became more
differently.
frequent, more
the
pervasive.
lines Pete
It was
detected
as
just
if the
west of
steady
the strange
broadcast
circles
from the
and
Mesa
to the
was
south of our
causing the
drill site
entire
in the
valley
Mesa
to
also
resonate
didn't
at a
look like
strange new
anything that would have
frequency,
formed in
shaking
nature.
loose all manner
We
of
couldn't tell
weirdness.
from this data
The team
how
started
deep they were from the
experiencing
surface,
auditory
but it looked like
hallucinations.
somebody or
Sully, while mending
something
a
created.
philology lab, heard
You
children
look
laughing
everywhere
just outside her
else where the
window,
water runs,
though
it
the
looks
cameras
more
showed nothing but
natural
empty
and
fields.
random, but you look at that
Shadows
spot,
moved
it
at
looks
the
like
edge
it
of
was
their
a
vision,
cut channel.
fleeting man-shaped
That
silhouettes
suggests
that would
man-made
dart
to
behind
me.
a building or
Anything
into the brush
that
the moment
linear
you
or
turn
that
to look directly
orthogonal.
at them. The
Where the Sherman
unflappable man
said,
of
"Not
rock-solid
to dig."
pragmatism was
The
the
current
most
ranch owner,
disturbed.
Brandon
This is
Fugel,
psychological,
was
he
warned
told
that
Eris one
disturbing
evening,
the
his
ground
face
in this
grim.
same area
It's
near
not a
Homestead Homestead 2 would cause dangerous peace to the early 2000s. A lot of the details of that era have still never been released to the public.
Against our sanity.
So, could these anomalies in the field near Homestead 2 be related to digging operations conducted by that team?
It wasn't
and
just
also
broadcasting in
explain why
radio
they said no
waves,
one should
it
ever
was
dig there.
broadcasting in
There
strangeness.
might be only one way to
It
find
was
out.
warping the local reality.
After
and
looking
they
at
were all
this,
trapped inside
I
the
think
distortion
that maybe
field.
Bigelow was
The
out
fear was
here
no
doing some
longer about a
digging.
sudden physical threat,
So
but a
it's
slow,
not hard for
creeping
me to
erosion
believe
of the
that
mind.
I think they'll
Chapter
start going
15,
north and south.
the
and
Pharaoh
dig some
directive.
swipes.
See if we can
The
intersect
discovery
it.
of
Yeah.
refined,
Yeah, you wanna
potentially
get down in that
non-terrestrial metals
plane and
combined
see
with the
what those
continuous
differences
intelligent
really are. If they
signal
go
had
deeper than the
finally
surface.
forced
Yeah, if it's
Brandon
compacted
Farrow's
and then
hand.
it's loose,
He
right?
arrived
And
unannounced,
we-
his
they
black
dug there
helicopter
before.
descending like a
are we
predatory
all in
insect
agreement
onto
then
the
we wanna go
ranch's
out and dig those couple
helipad.
spots?
With him was a woman who introduced
So I'll
herself
make some
only as
arrangements
Dr.
and we'll
Anya
get an
Sharma.
excavator out
She
here
was a
and
stark
we'll go out and
contrast
dig.
to the rugged, weathered
Okay.
team. Dressed
Yeah,
in a
love it.
crisp, tailored
Let's keep
suit,
grinding
she
on
had an
this
air of
right now.
quiet, formidable intelligence. Her field, Farrow
Yep,
explained,
you
was
guys water, let me know if you
xenolinguistics
get
and
good
material
pressure up
science
there.
with a background in a government agency whose
The
name
following
he
morning,
didn't specify.
while Joe Lowe
Sharma
continued
listened
drilling into the
impassively
top
as
of the
Harris
mesa,
and Leo presented their findings, the
the
circuit
rest of
boards,
us
the
joined
signal's
Thomas
mathematical
Winterton out in the
language, the
field near
metallic
Homestead
flakes.
2,
She
where he
examined
was
the
waiting
flakes
with a
under a
3-ton
portable
excavator.
electron microscope she'd
We
brought
were
with
eager
her,
to start
her face
digging to see
betraying
just
no
what all
emotion.
these anomalies
The
under the
lattice struck
surface.
0.3-second packet was gone.
And that
In
was-
its place was a new
Hey,
signal.
guys, y'all
It
come
was
look at
simpler,
this.
cleaner. A short,
What do you got?
elegant pulse,
You find a
followed by a
discontinuity?
pause.
Yeah.
Then another pulse.
See this
And another
gray
pause.
clay stuff?
What
and
is
it
it,
stops
Dragon
right
asked?
there.
It's a
Yeah.
handshake protocol, Dr.
I'm
Sharma
looking
said, her
through here
voice
and I'm not
barely a
seeing
whisper.
anything like-
She stepped
No,
forward,
there's
her
nothing like
professional
that through here.
composure
It's a
finally
layer.
cracking, revealing
Definitely
a
a
flicker
layer.
of pure,
It's about
unadulterated
bulldozer width.
awe. It has
Yeah.
stopped broadcasting its
Well, I wasn't
dictionary.
expecting that.
It has identified our
We
passive
have
listening
some-
systems.
It's
It
obvious
is now
that this
sending
is a
out a
spot that we
simple,
really
clear
need to learn
query.
as much as we can
A
about.
query for what
There you
Sully
go.
asked.
Right there's a piece of it right
Leo
there.
translated the binary pulses into a
It's got
simple
some
visual. A
really
single dot
fine
appeared on the
crystalline
screen.
material. But why is it here?
Now,
Yeah,
it's
why is it
asking
here?
who we are.
Let's know.
It's waiting for us to complete the
Neither
sequence.
Eric nor I
The room
had
fell
any
silent.
idea what to make of
On
the
the
grayish
screen, the two
material
dots
we uncovered
vanished,
in the
and after a
field
precisely
just
timed
east of
pause,
Homestead
the
2.
single dot
But it
reappeared,
definitely
repeating the
corresponded
call.
with the lines we
One,
saw in
then
Pete
two,
Kelsey's
waiting for
multispectral
three.
scans of the
They
area.
stood at the precipice of a
nothing
new
else that tells us
reality. The
how
sleeping
accurate that
god was no longer
multispectral
sleeping.
data is.
This
Chapter
is as close as I
17,
want to get to
the
We'll get out of your way,
trespass.
Thomas.
All
data,
eyes turned
but
to
it's
Dr.
pretty-
Sharma.
We can't think of
She had been
a
silent
mundane
throughout the
explanation
argument,
why
her
a
gaze
farmer would
fixed on
dig
the
5
pulsing
straight
signal.
lines in a
She
field
represented
and put
the
this,
official world,
you
the
know,
world
gray,
of protocol,
silvery,
and carefully managed
shiny rock in
consequences.
there.
Protocol for a
And-
situation of this
there's
nature
no-
does
it
not
makes no
exist,
sense.
So
she
you
said,
can only see
finally,
in
her
the
voice quiet but
multispectrum.
firm.
Right.
Because
would
this
think about it.
situation
We would've
has never
even
existed.
thought about this, but
The
having
Farrow
that
directive is based on a
multispectral
sound, logical
data.
assessment of risk.
And we look at it,
However,
we see these lines, we come
she
look for it, we
paused,
find
taking a
it.
deep breath.
Why is it?
The
I was
intelligence
trying
is
to
not
come up with
acting
some
illogically.
reason
Its
for these
initial
straight
response
lines
was
of
a kinetic
crystal-like
warning, a
materials that
precise
look very
targeted
clearly
application of
deposited.
force to establish a
Two
boundary.
thoughts.
Okay.
And both
Its
of them are a
current
little bit
action is
crazy.
an offering, a
Imagine
logical mathematical
maybe during
query.
the Bigelow era,
It is
they were doing
following a
some
de-escalation
classified
protocol.
program, and they
To
dug
ignore a clear
straight
offer of
lines, put this
communication
reflective
could be
material in, they
interpreted
covered
as
it
a
all
hostile
up
act
so they
in
could
itself.
look at it with a
Harris stared
classified
at her, a
sensor
slow
from
grin
space or high
spreading
altitude.
across his face.
Okay.
But
She was
that's
giving
a
him the
stretch.
loophole
To what
he
end? You're an
needed.
advanced
So
civilization,
inaction could be
and
more
you were
dangerous
marking an
than
area
action,
for
he
some reason.
summarized.
And you
Sharma
didn't
gave
want
a
the
slight,
indigenous
almost
population to know
imperceptible
about
nod.
it.
It is a
You would
non-zero
put it in a
possibility.
way that
That
is
was
in
enough.
plain sight. We
The
would have
weight
never
of the
found
moment
it.
settled
And we
on
not had
Harris's
the
shoulders.
multispectral technology.
Brandon
to
Farrow
find
had
it
entrusted
there.
him with the ranch,
And that's how
but
we
history
found
was
it.
entrusting him
Who's
with
to
this
say it's not
moment.
reflective in
He
some
would
other
bear the
phenomenology
consequences.
that's
Leo,
more
he said,
advanced
his
than the
voice
multispectral
ringing with
thing. It might be a
newfound
bright
authority,
beacon of
set
5
up a
lines out here in the
low-powered
field.
directional transmitter.
These
Aim it at the
five
heart of the
perfect
mesa. We're
stripes
going to
in this
answer the
field
call.
make about as much
Dragon
sense
sighed a
to me
sound
as
like
that big
grinding
dome
stone,
object in
but
the
he didn't
mesa.
object further.
I
He
came to
simply walked to the
Skinwalker
weapons
Ranch as a
locker
skeptic
and
4
began
years
checking
ago.
his equipment.
But after seeing
If they were
more
going to
UAPs
trespass,
than I can
he would
count,
be ready
and
for the
detecting all
landlord to
kinds
object.
of mysterious
Chapter
frequencies,
18.
some of which may
3
be
dots.
communication signals,
Crafting the reply
I don't
was
know
an
what to think
exercise in
anymore.
profound,
I can't
nerve-wracking
believe this is
simplicity.
natural.
They
If it were
couldn't send a
natural,
message
it would
in
be
English
all over
or
the
any
ranch.
human language.
Yeah,
Not a
geophysics.
shout. Do it, Aries
After the
commanded.
dig near home, share them
Leo
with the
pressed the
team.
button.
The
For a
interesting
fraction of a
thing
second, three
is,
pulses of energy, the
so
collective
if you
voice of
scroll
humanity shot across
a
the
little bit
valley
to the right
and into
there,
the
Eric, so
stone
we can
heart of
see
the
it.
mesa.
What it's got
The
in it,
effect
the
was
abundant
instantaneous
materials in it
and absolute.
are
The moment their
sodium,
transmission ended, the
magnesium.
mesa's signal ceased.
There's
The
a
steady
little bit of scandium, not a lot,
72.3
but a
second
lot
loop
of
of pi and
calcium
physical
and
constants
potassium,
that had
and there's a
become the
lot
ranch's
of
heartbeat for
aluminum
over a
and
week
iron.
vanished.
Well,
The
if you
spectrum
remember when
analyzer,
we
which had been a
analyzed the drill
waterfall of
mud,
data, flatlined.
But
It wasn't
inside
just
the
the
mesa
signal.
where we drill
Everything
is
stopped.
also what these
The
white
auditory
gray
hallucinations,
lines are
the
that's
phantom
out there at
big
the
band and laughing
multispectral.
children across the
You
screen
can
like
measure
liquid
with other
silver.
equipment.
It's a library.
And the multispectral
Dr.
thing is just
Sharma
a side
murmured, her
effect that
face
it had on the
pale with
vegetation,
shock
and we're
and
able to
awe.
see it now.
It's not just talking to
was
us.
it intended that way from the
It's-
start?
It's teaching us.
Walking out
It was
there,
the
I wouldn't have
Library
known
of
there was
Alexandria
anything there. I
from a
wouldn't have suspected
civilization
it.
a billion years
Perfectly
old
hidden.
fired at them
Only
point
people
blank.
with the advanced
The history,
technology
science,
that we've
biology, and
discovered within
language
the
of a
last handful
species
of
so
years
advanced that
could
their
see those
simplest
lines.
concepts
And what
were
were they
pushing
leading
the
to, and
limits
what were
of
they
human
pointing at?
comprehension.
So we've talked
They were
about
being
two
given a gift of
interpretations, one of
unimaginable
them being that
value,
it's,
a key
that
to
it's a
unlock the
marking,
secrets
it's an
of the
indicator.
universe.
And the other
But
one
as Eris
that I find
stared at
really
the
interesting is
overwhelming
that it is
flood of
somehow
information, a
functional.
cold dread
Where
began
would
to
it be
creep up
coming
his
from, and
spine.
what's it going to?
Why?
That's the question.
Why give
And
this
the
to them
discussion's
now?
not
Gifts
complete
of this
without
magnitude
reminding
rarely
ourselves
came
here.
a growl from the
Don't know
security
what this
station.
thing is and how it got
Eris.
there. I think it's a mystery.
We have
We need to get to the
company.
bottom of it.
On the
At this
ground,
point, it
Eris
makes sense.
yelled
Just
over the
leave it
den.
as it is.
Worst
Don't
Dragon
change
said,
anything.
pointing to the
If we
long-range
study
radar
it,
display
basically, we don't know what it is.
in the sky.
Yeah.
But
On
we
the
need to see
screen
what's
high
underneath
above the
entire
Utah
ranch.
desert,
I
3
agree.
new
Some
signals
more
had appeared.
studies,
They were at an
narrative
altitude
here.
of
I
over
agree.
8,000 feet, well above abruptly as it began. It left behind a trail of smoking processors, corrupted hard drives, and a team of scientists teetering on the brink of a collective nervous breakdown. They had managed to capture less than 0.1% of the total download, yet even that fragmentary data was enough to occupy humanity's greatest minds for the next century. The silence that followed was broken by the angry chop of helicopter blades. Brandon Farrow was back, and he was not happy. He stormed into the command center, his face a mask of cold fury. "You had a direct order, Thorne," he snapped, his voice dangerously quiet. A simple 2-word directive. Also detected a surge in seismic activity directly beneath the mesa. You didn't just knock on the door, you took a battering ram to it. Dr. Sharma stepped forward, placing herself between the two men. Mr. Farrow Eris made the correct decision based on my assessment. The intelligence initiated a de-escalation. To refuse would have been a diplomatic failure of the highest order. What we received was not an attack, but a gift. A gift, Farrow scoffed. A gift that announced our position to every interested party in a 100 light-year radius. We are now a specimen under a cosmic microscope. This operation is over. I'm pulling the plug. "You can't," Eris pleaded. "We're on the verge of understanding everything." "You have 24 hours, Farrow interrupted, his eyes like chips of ice. 24 hours to give me a single actionable piece of intelligence from that library you've collected. One core message. One reason why I shouldn't bury this entire ranch under a mountain of concrete and pretend none of this ever happened? You wanted to talk to God, Doctor. Now you will tell me what he said. The clock is ticking." He turned on his heel and left the ultimatum hanging in the air like a death sentence. The greatest discovery in history was now a time bomb, and they had 1 day to defuse it. Chapter 22, The Rosetta Stone. The next 24 hours were a frantic, desperate sprint through a forest of alien information. Sleep was a luxury none of them could afford. They divided the captured data, each searching for a pattern, a key, a foothold in the mountain of incomprehensible knowledge. It was Evelyn, the geologist, who found the first thread, buried in a data block that seemed to be a catalog of planetary systems. She found a star chart that was chillingly familiar. "It's our solar system," she said, her voice hoarse. "But it's not a chart from here. It's a chart of here." A geological and biological survey dated. The numbers are strange, but if I'm converting this time dilation coefficient correctly, it's dated approximately 65 million years ago. The time of the dinosaurs. The time of the Chicxulub impactor. The team stared at the screen, the implications sinking in. The mesa hadn't just arrived. It had been here watching for a very, very long time. The true breakthrough, however, came from the combined efforts of Leo and Sharma. While sifting through the torrent of alien glyphs, Leo's pattern recognition software flagged a single recurring symbol. It was an elegant spiral-shaped glyph that appeared in conjunction with specific repeating datasets. "I'm calling it the danger glyph," Leo said, pointing to it on the holographic display. "Because every time it appears, it's cross-referenced with astronomical data showing a star going nova or a planet's atmosphere being stripped away." Working on this hunch, Sharma cross-referenced the glyph with the complex molecular models they had downloaded. She found a match. The danger glyph was always charts, the molecule, and the glyph. They were three parts of a single horrifying message. Chapter 23, The Warning and the Pilgrimage. As the final hours of Pharaoh's ultimatum ticked away, Eris, Sharma, and Leo pieced together the narrative. The picture that emerged was more terrifying than any of them could have imagined. The data was not a gift. It was an archive, a memorial. The mesa was a lifeboat, a seed bank of knowledge from a civilization that had been extinguished eons ago. The star charts showed their homeworld, a planet orbiting a binary star system in a galaxy so distant it was just a smudge in humanity's most powerful telescopes. The download contained their history, their art, their science, the sum total of a billion-year-old culture, and it contained their ending. The danger glyph was their name for the consuming plague, the silent fire. The star charts became a map of its relentless advance across their corner of the galaxy, a wave of cosmic death that left sterilized worlds in its wake. The Mesa intelligence, it seemed, was the last survivor. A sentient archive sent out into the void in a desperate final act of self-preservation, carrying the memory of a civilization that was no more. It had journeyed for millennia, eventually arriving in our solar system and embedding itself in the geology of a young, vibrant Earth to wait, to hide, to sleep. It had witnessed the rise and fall of the dinosaurs, the coming of the ice ages, and the dawn of humanity. Our drilling, it didn't just wake it up. Eris realized the horror of their actions dawning on him. It thought they had found it. The silent fire. It panicked. It dumped its entire archive, its entire soul into our systems as a final act of defiance. It wasn't a lesson, it was a warning. It was screaming, they're coming. And the Watchers, were they the advanced scouts of the silent fire drawn by the sudden panic broadcast? Or were they something else entirely? A galactic patrol, a different species that monitored for such awakenings dedicated to containing the plague? The truth was a double-edged sword. They had discovered proof of intelligent alien life, but that proof was an obituary. And it came with a warning that a galactic-level threat, a civilization killer, was not only real, but knew that this corner of the universe was occupied. Chapter 24, The Choice. When Brandon Farrow's helicopter returned, Eris presented their findings. He laid out the story of the lost civilization, the silent fire, and the mesa's desperate warning. Farrow listened in stunned silence, his anger replaced by a chilling, pragmatic dread. This information cannot leave this ranch. Farrow said, his voice absolute. To release this would cause global panic market collapse war. It would tear our civilization apart before the threat even arrives. Humanity has a right to know, Eris argued, his own voice filled with a desperate conviction. We have a right to prepare. Prepare for what Farrow shot back. A molecular plague that consumed a civilization a billion years our senior. We can't even cure the common cold. Eris ignorance is our only shield. We will study this data in secret. We will control the narrative. That is the only way. As they argued, an alarm each the size of a commercial airliner. They descended in perfect silence. A silence so profound it felt like a physical pressure on the ears. The team on the ground could only stare, their own petty squabbles and existential fears rendered insignificant by the sheer majestic reality of what was happening. Dragon had his security team in tactical positions, their rifles looking like children's toys against the impossible scale of the visitors. Farrow stood beside Eris, his face pale, the mask of the powerful billionaire stripped away to reveal a man utterly out of his depth. The spheres did not land. They stopped approximately 1,000 feet above the ground, forming a perfect equilateral triangle with the mesa at its center. For a moment, they simply hung there, three new suns in the Utah sky. Then a low hum began, a subsonic vibration that resonated not in the air, but in the ground and the bones of everyone present. From the base of each sphere, a curtain of shimmering energy like a transparent heat haze began to descend. The three curtains connected, forming a shimmering cylindrical wall of light that enclosed the entire 512-acre property. The wall reached the ground and vanished, but the hum remained. Leo was the first to realize what had happened. He stared at his tablet, his knuckles white. No signal, he whispered. No satellite uplink, no cellular, no radio shortwave or long. Nothing is getting in or out. We're in a Faraday cage the size of a small town. They were cut off. The watchers hadn't landed for a conversation. They had erected a barrier. They had placed the entire ranch and everyone on it under quarantine. Simultaneously, a new quiet fell over the property. The seismic tremors from the mesa ceased. The strange ambient energy fields they had measured for years collapsed to zero. Even the persistent psychological phenomena, the shadow people, the phantom sounds, vanished. The mesa had gone dark, pulling a blanket of silence over itself, as if hiding from the new arrivals. "They're not the silent fire," Dr. Sharma said, her voice filled with a dawning, terrifying understanding. "They are the response. They are the antibodies to the infection." Chapter 26. The Custodian's Message. Trapped within the silent, shimmering walls of the quarantine, the team waited. The watchers remained motionless in the sky, their purpose a terrifying mystery. The power was still on, their local systems worked, but their connection to the outside world was severed as completely as if the rest of the planet had ceased to exist. They were an island adrift in a sea of cosmic uncertainty. The first message from the watchers came 12 hours later. It did not come via the 1.6 gigahertz frequency. It came on every frequency. Every radio, every monitor, every speaker on the ranch crackled to life at the same instant, broadcasting a single, clean carrier wave. Leo and Sharma worked feverishly isolating the signal and decoding the mathematical language layered within it. The message was not a flood of data like the mesas. It was brutally simple and efficient. On the holographic display, a series of images appeared rendered in stark universal iconography. First, the complex rotating model of the silent fire prion molecule. Then a symbol that could only be interpreted as contagion one, molecule touching another, creating two, then four, an exponential cancerous spread. Then, a simple stylized image of a human being, the iconic representation from the Pioneer plaque. And finally, the image of their ranch, a circle with a dot in the middle, surrounded by a larger circle, a quarantine. The message was chillingly clear. The silent fire molecule has been detected. You have been exposed. This area is under quarantine. "They think we are the contagion," Evelyn said, her voice trembling. "Because the Mesa gave us the data, we are now considered carriers of the informational plague." The watchers were not hostile. They were sanitary. They were the galactic custodians, the hazmat team that shows up after a toxic spill. The Mesa's data dump had been the equivalent of a vial of smallpox breaking open, and the watchers were here to contain the outbreak before it could spread. The team looked at each other, the true nature of their predicament settling upon them. They were not prisoners of an enemy, but patients in an isolation ward. Their captors were not malevolent, but their methods were absolute. Brandon Farrow's desire for secrecy had become a terrifying physical reality imposed not by him, but by a power that viewed planetary civilizations as potential health risks. Chapter 27, The Task. The second message arrived an hour after the first. It was even simpler and infinitely more daunting. The holographic display showed a detailed schematic, a cutaway view of the mesa based on scans of impossible resolution. It showed the vast hollow caverns, the impenetrable dome of the buried artifact, and highlighted in red the sealed entrance that Chris Bartell had shown them. Then a new symbol appeared next to the sealed door. It was a simple, unambiguous glyph, a circle with a line breaking through it. "Open." "My God," Eris whispered, "they want us to go in." They weren't just being quarantined, they were being deputized. The watchers, for reasons of their own, perhaps a non-interference directive, perhaps a simple matter of practicality, were not going to act directly. They had contained the problem. Now they were tasking the inhabitants of the contaminated zone to deal with the source. They were being ordered to unseal the tomb, to enter the heart of the archive and confront the ancient panicked intelligence that had started it all. The choice was no longer about whether to talk to God. The custodians of the galaxy had arrived, and they had just handed them a search warrant. They were to be the instruments of the quarantine the agents sent to the heart of the infection. Dragon looked from the image on the screen to the silent glowing spheres hanging in the sky. He walked to the weapons locker and began handing out rifles. "Looks like we're going digging after all," he said, his voice grim. "But this time we're not looking for answers. We're serving a subpoena." Chapter 28, The Breaching Protocol. The Watcher's command open was an order without an instruction manual. The sealed entrance to the mesa was a jumble of multi-ton boulders that had been as the former guard Bartell put it placed. Conventional explosives were out of the question. The risk of collapsing the entire structure was too high, and nobody wanted to test the patience of the glowing custodians in the sky. The solution came from one of Brandon Farrow's hidden caches. In a climate-controlled shipping container behind Homestead, a place Sully had always assumed was full of spare parts, was a portable plasma cutter. It wasn't a welder's tool, it was a piece of military-grade hardware designed for silent surgical demolitions, powered by a small, self-contained fusion core. Farrow, it seemed, had been prepared for more than just strange weather. "So you were always expecting to have to break into something," Eris remarked dryly as Dragon and his team, clad in heavy protective gear, wheeled the formidable device towards the mesa. "I expect everything," Dr. Thorne Farrow replied, his eyes fixed on the boulders. His previous anger had been replaced by a grim, focused intensity. The quarantine had made him a king with a kingdom of 1 square mile, and he was now as much a prisoner as the rest of them. That's why I'm still alive. Under Evelyn's guidance, they targeted the key stress points in the rock formation. The plasma cutter came to life with a low, hungry hum, unleashing a needle-thin beam of incandescent energy that was brighter than the Sunday in Freehaven, dim Dacian deses. It sliced through the sandstone, not with a bang, but with a hiss, vaporizing the rock and leaving behind perfectly smooth, cauterized edges. It took 6 hours of tense, methodical work. They cut the largest boulders into manageable sections, which the ranch's heavy-duty tractor could then haul away. As they removed the final piece, a wave of cool, ancient air washed over them. A dark, perfectly circular tunnel was revealed, 10 feet in diameter, sloping down into the blackness of the mesa. The air that poured from it was sterile and carried a faint, clean scent like ozone after a thunderstorm. It was the smell of a place that had been sealed for a very long time. Chapter 29. The Threshold. An away team was assembled: Eris for his scientific insight, Evelyn for her geological expertise, Caleb for his sharp eyes, and Dragon to keep them all alive. They were outfitted in lightweight environmental suits, not for pressure or atmosphere, but for biocontainment. The Watcher's message had been clear: they were considered contaminated. Their primary communication link was a laser-based system set up by Leo, who would be their eyes and ears from the command center, along with Sharma and Farrow. Radio waves wouldn't penetrate the deep rock, but a direct line of sight laser could carry data back and forth, as long as they unspooled a fiber optic cable behind them. Standing at the threshold, Eris felt the profound weight of the moment. He was about to step into a place untouched by man, a structure that predated humanity itself. It was the ultimate archaeological expedition. Comms check. Dragon's voice crackled in his helmet. "Everyone good?" A chorus of affirmatives. "All right," Dragon said. "Lights on, weapons hot, stay on my 6. Leo, you have the eye." "I see you loud and clear," Leo's voice replied, a tinny reassurance from another world. Like a video game, but with more dust and a higher chance of cosmic annihilation. With Dragon in the lead, they stepped through the opening. The world outside the familiar Utah sky with its 3 silent white suns vanished. They were enveloped in an absolute darkness and an even more absolute silence. The only sounds were the hum of their suit filters and the crunch of their boots on the dusty floor. The powerful beams of their helmet lamps cut through the black, revealing a tunnel that was unnervingly perfect. The walls weren't rough-hewn stone. They were smooth, almost polished, with a dark basalt-like finish. It was less a cave and more a corridor that had been waiting for them. Chapter 30. The Hall of Echoes. As they ventured deeper, the true nature of the structure became apparent. The walls were not bare. They were covered from floor to ceiling in the same interlocking spiral glyphs they had seen in the data download. The script flowed in dense, elegant patterns, sometimes arranged in neat columns, sometimes swirling into vast, complex mosaics. "It's a library," Eris breathed, running his gloved hand just above the surface of a wall. He could feel a faint vibration emanating from it. The entire interior is the archive. The download was just the index page. They were walking through the memory of a dead civilization. The psychic phenomena that had plagued them on the surface returned, but with a terrifying new clarity. Here in the heart of the machine, it wasn't just whispers and shadows. The archive was reading them, pulling images and fears from their own minds and projecting them into the darkness. Evelyn saw a flash of a childhood car accident, the screech of tires echoing in the silent hall. Caleb saw the face of his estranged father, his expression filled with disappointment. Dragon was assaulted by visceral flashes of his tours in Afghanistan, the smoke, the shouting, the faces of fallen comrades. Eris felt a different kind of intrusion. His mind was filled with surges of alien emotion, a sense of loss so profound it felt like a physical weight, a loneliness that spanned millennia, and a deep abiding terror of the silent fire. He was feeling the archive's own trauma. It's a defense mechanism. Sharma's voice cut through the psychic static from the command center. It's trying to scare you away by using your own fears against you. It is a terrified, wounded thing. Do not let it provoke you. They pressed on the fiber optic cable, spooling out behind them a fragile silver thread connecting them to their own world. The corridor opened into a vast, cavernous chamber. In the center, several crystalline pillars, twice the height of a man, pulsed with a soft internal blue light. They hummed with a low, resonant energy. Between them, lying on the floor, was the source of the metallic glint they had seen with the snake camera. It was part of a larger console, shattered and dark as if from some ancient impact. Chapter 31, The Heart of the Archive. Following a faint energy trail that only Eris's tricorder could detect, they found another tunnel leading from the main chamber, sloping ever deeper into the earth. The psychic pressure intensified with every step, the archive's fear and grief washing over them in waves. The tunnel ended abruptly, opening onto a ledge that overlooked a truly colossal space. It was a spherical cavern hundreds of feet in diameter. The air within it shimmered with a faint silvery energy. And in the exact center, floating in a state of perfect gravity-defying suspension, was the source of it all. It was not a creature or a computer. It was a crystalline sphere, at least 50 feet in diameter, composed of countless interlocking facets that shifted and changed in a constant silent ballet. Light generated from within flowed through its crystalline structures, forming complex, ever-changing patterns of glyphs and symbols. It was a geode of pure information, a living jewel of data. It was the heart of the archive. The moment they stepped onto the ledge, it reacted. The psychic noise ceased. The shifting light within the crystal coalesced into a single stable image, a three-dimensional projection that filled the cavern. It was a star chart. But this time, it was not of a distant galaxy or of Earth's past. It was a real-time map of their immediate cosmic neighborhood. It showed their sun, the planets of their solar system and their current orbits, and the vast empty space beyond. Then at the edge of the Oort cloud, three new symbols appeared. They were the Watchers, and coming in fast behind them, represented by the spiraling danger glyph, was a vast dark cloud, the Silent Fire. The archive spoke to them then, not in words, but in a flood of pure conceptual understanding. The message was simple and devastating. The Watchers are not here to save you. They are here to contain me. The Silent Fire is not coming. It has always been here. You did not wake me. You woke them. The star chart shifted. It zoomed in on the dark cloud. It was not a fleet. It was a swarm of trillions of microscopic entities, dormant and inert, as they traveled through the void. The chart then showed the Watchers' vessels projecting a containment field not around the ranch, but around the entire solar system. The final concept flooded their minds, a truth so terrible it buckled Eris to his knees. The Watchers were not custodians. They were shepherds. The Silent Fire was their herd. They had guided it here to this solar system, a rich, untapped pasture of carbon-based life. The Mesa was an anomaly. They had not anticipated a forgotten sentinel from a long-dead enemy. The Mesa's panicked broadcast had not been a warning to humanity. It had been an alarm alerting the Watchers that this pasture was already claimed by an old foe. Their little experiment on a dusty ranch in Utah hadn't just gotten the attention of the galactic community. It had stumbled into the middle of a conflict between an ancient slumbering refugee and a group of cosmic grazers who were about to let their world-eating flock loose upon the Earth. The quarantine wasn't to protect the galaxy from them. It was to keep them from interfering while the shepherds prepared their flock to feed. Part X, The Last Gambit. Chapter 32, The Two Primes. The conceptual flood receded, leaving the four humans on the ledge reeling in a silence more profound than any sound. The truth had not set them free. It had imprisoned them in a cage of horrifying scale. Humanity was not on the verge of first contact. They were livestock in a field, and the farmers had arrived. Dragon was the first to recover his military training kicking in. He raised his rifle, the gesture a futile act of defiance against the cosmic absurdity of their situation. "So we fight," he said, his voice a low growl that was more for his own benefit than anyone else's. "Fight what?" Dragon Evelyn whispered, her face ashen. "The shepherds, the flock. We don't even register on their scale." As they spoke, the crystalline heart of the archive shifted its projection. The terrifying star chart dissolved, replaced by two symbols floating in the center of the cavern. One was the spiraling, chaotic glyph of the silent fire. The other was new. It was a perfectly symmetrical, stable, and intricate crystalline pattern. Between them, a single, unwavering line of light. Antithesis, the archive communicated the concept blooming in their minds: cure, weapon. The projection changed again, showing a history they had missed in the initial data dump. It showed the archive's creators, a tall, slender species with 4 arms and luminous skin, in their final desperate days. They had developed a counter-agent to the silent fire, a synthetic nanite swarm designed to seek out and neutralize the consuming plague at a molecular level. It was a perfect weapon, a silver bullet for a cosmic vampire, but they had created it too late. They lacked the resources and time to deploy it on a galactic scale. The silent fire consumed their civilization before their cure could be unleashed. And so they created the archive. It was not just a library to preserve their memory. It was an arsenal waiting to be opened. A final defiant gambit sent out into the void, a seed of hope and vengeance. Chapter 33, The Ark and the Key. The archive's true purpose was now clear. It was designed to integrate itself into a geologically stable, life-bearing world and wait. Its long-term protocol was to monitor the dominant native species, allowing them to evolve to a state of technological and intellectual maturity sufficient to comprehend its contents and, if the need arose, to deploy its weapon. Your evolution was accelerated. The archive conveyed a hint of something akin to surprise in its tone. The timeline was not yet optimal. Their drilling, their probing, their desperate search for answers had been, from the archive's perspective, like a premature birth. They had forced it awake before it, or they were truly ready. The strange phenomena they had witnessed for years, the circuit board on the land, the energy fields, the gravitational anomalies, were all part of the archive's slow, patient process of drawing power from the planet's geothermal and magnetic. The fields preparing for a day of activation it had calculated would be millions of years in their future. Now it presented them with the final critical pieces of information. The synthesis of the counteragent required 2 things: an immense burst of energy to initiate the nanite replication and a biological catalyst to encode the final programming. The energy source the projection showed was the dome at the heart of the mesa, not a ship, but a colossal, semi-sentient power core. The catalyst, the key to unlocking the weapon, that was more complicated. It needed a host, a complex sentient biological organism to serve as the template and the initial delivery system. It needed one of them. Chapter 34, The Offer. The choice was laid bare not as a question, but as a statement of fact, a path forward. In the command center, the same conceptual data packet flooded the minds of Pharaoh, Sharma, and Leo. Pharaoh was the first to speak, his voice a hoarse whisper. "A living weapon. A human with the power to destroy this flock." The fear in his eyes was replaced by a familiar predatory gleam. Power on a scale he had never dreamed of was once again within his grasp. Dr. Sharma saw it differently. "It's a sacrifice," she said, her voice heavy, "a single human life to hold the line for the entire species. The ultimate volunteer." Inside the cavern, the away team stood frozen. The archive was offering them a chance, a single desperate opportunity to fight back. But the price was the soul of one of them. To bond with the nanites to become the cure would mean being transformed into something beyond human. The host would become the living embodiment of the antithesis, a being of unimaginable power but at the cost of their own humanity. It was a form of death, or perhaps a terrifying new form of birth. The projection of the two primes, the plague and the cure, pulsed softly in the silent cavern. The archive had made its offer. Now it waited. Above them, the shepherds were preparing their pasture, unaware that the livestock was about to develop an entirely new kind of predator. Chapter 35, The Volunteer. "I'll do it," Dragon said, his voice flat and resolute. He lowered his rifle. "It's a soldier's choice. I'm the security chief. My job is to protect this team, this planet. It's simple." "No, it's not," Evelyn countered, her voice shaking. "You're a soldier, Dragon, not a biologist. You have no idea what this would do to you. We need to understand the process." "There's no time to understand," Caleb blurted out his fear, finally giving way to a desperate anger. "Don't you get it? They're getting ready to ring the dinner bell up there." The argument was a torrent of logic, duty, and terror. Each of them had a reason to volunteer and a reason to be terrified, but it was Eris who remained silent, his gaze fixed on the glowing crystalline heart. He had started this. His insatiable curiosity, his academic exile, his relentless pushing of the boundaries had led them all to this precipice. He had come to this ranch seeking a truth beyond the mundane, and he had found it. The truth was a monster, but it was also a key. "It has to be me," Eris said, his voice cutting through the arguments. All eyes turned to him. "This isn't about who's the toughest or the most expendable." He continued walking slowly toward the center of the ledge. "The archive isn't just a weapon, it's a library. The nanites need more than just a biological host. They need a guide, someone who can process the data, who can understand the enemy, who can think on a level this thing can interface with. It's a battle of information, not attrition. I am the only one who speaks enough of its language to stand a chance." He was right. They all knew it. It was a horrifying, perfect logic. Dragon stepped forward to protest, but Eris held up a hand. "You're the shield, Dragon. Your job is to get everyone else out of here and hold the line. That's an order." Eris Thorne, the man who had been cast out for his belief in aliens, was now about to become one. He looked back at his team, at the small, terrified family he had found in this strange, impossible place. He gave them a small, sad smile. Then he turned and walked toward the edge of the ledge, facing the magnificent, terrible heart of the archive. He raised his hand palm open, a gesture of acceptance. The crystalline sphere responded. A single needle-thin beam of pure white light shot out from its core and enveloped him. He was lifted from the ground, his body held suspended in the air. He didn't scream. His face was a mask of agony and ecstasy as 1 billion years of knowledge, grief, and power poured into him. The away team could only watch in horror and awe as the man they knew was unmade and remade, his human form dissolving into a being of pure incandescent energy. The last gambit had been accepted. The weapon was being forged.